Well, friends, Module 5 is probably what you are all excited to hear about. How this homeschooling thing actually works and how we can set up our kids for academic success. Hint, even if you don't cover every subject like you think you should, your kids will be okay, I promise. You're in the right place if you want to know about teaching kids to love learning, discovering your child's unique talents and interests, finding ways your children can learn best, and how to surround yourself with a positive team. Now, I have a story that I often like to tell. I remember my third child on his first day of college. It was at a state university, and I was actually driving him there because we needed the car for later that day. On the way there, I panicked because I suddenly realized that I had never taught Nathan how to write a 5-paragraph essay. Oh my goodness, I was so nervous. I apologized profusely and I worried all day. When Nathan got home from college that night, I asked him how it went, and he said, well, the first thing my English teacher is going to go over in the coming weeks is how to write a 5-paragraph essay. I felt so relieved, and I actually had forgot that in college, teachers teach. This is why I tell you that story. Even if you don't cover every subject like you think you could and should, your kids will be okay. So, what should you do to set your children up for the best academic success? We're going to talk about guiding their interests and how that's just as important as teaching the basics. All right, here is my light bulb moment. Number one, as a homeschooling mom, our kids aren't empty vessels to fill. Each child will have his or her unique gifts and talents. And this is one of the amazing things about homeschool. I know in private school or public school, they have to teach general items, general subjects, because you're teaching between 20 and 30 kids. But in homeschool, you can tailor that. Light bulb moment number two. This might surprise you, but the secret to setting your kids up for academic success is not finding the perfect curriculum, which doesn't exist. It's actually teaching kids to love to learn. And I think the coolest thing is when my adult kids are around the table and they're talking about things that they discovered, books that they're reading, new hobbies they're taking up, things that they've researched. My 26-year-old has researched completely how to do his own video games and to sell them on Google Play. That came from him loving to learn new things and trying it out. So how do kids learn? Number one, discovery, finding things that interest them. Number two, engagement, seeing, hearing, exploring, experimenting, and asking questions. Number three, play, inquiry, expression, experimentation, and teamwork. And number four, language. The more words and ideas they're exposed to, the more neural pathways they develop. And this is one reason why I love reading aloud to my kids. And I've even seen it in our fourth child. I brought her home from public school, and she was a good student in public school. And she was excited to be homeschooling. She had her own curriculum. But for hours every day, in addition to doing her own curriculum, she would listen to me read out loud to her siblings. She never got that in her biological family's home and in foster care. And she loved hearing me read these really good books. And the amazing thing was her ACT scores jumped drastically in an amazing way. I had an English teacher friend said they've never seen someone's English scores on ACT jump so much. And really, I believe it is because of this language. As I read out loud, all those words were brought into her neural pathways, and it opened up things that had been closed for so long. So let's talk about how we can practically help kids to learn. And the first one is to understand and to figure out our child's learning styles. So my friend Christy Clover talks about the time she discovered her learning style. She was in college taking an anatomy class. She loved the class, but kept getting low grades because she couldn't memorize all the information. Then one day she figured out that if she used different colored highlighters to mark information, she would remember it. She's a visual learner. She got an A, and she learned an important life skill. With homeschooling, you can give that skill to your kids before college. You can figure out how they learn best. Now, personally, I'm an auditory learner. If I hear it, I remember it. And there's times I'm working on an article or a section of a book or a novel. I've had this in a nonfiction book, marriage book. I called a friend and said, "Remember that story you told me?" And it was literally 15 years prior. And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Can I put that in my book?" And she said, "How in the world could you remember that story?" Because if I hear it, I remember it. And so think about how you like to learn and how you take things in. Now, my son Nathan is also an auditory learner. In high school, he really struggled with reading textbooks and having to answer questions. He would just get so bogged down and overwhelmed. But I figured out that if I bought him audiobooks and video lessons from great courses, and I'll have a link for this in the resource section of your workbook. But if I bought him they're college lectures, either audio or video, he took in so much more information. He zoomed through lecture after lecture when before he struggled with 10 pages of a textbook. And so that is how you can really show your child that you're paying attention and you can help them learn in the best way possible. So first, let's figure out our child's learning styles. So visual is a child who learns best when they see the information. So they might like a video about something. They might like to read it on a page. Kinesthetic learners are a child who learns by doing, touching, or moving. So they love the science projects. They love to touch things and move them and feel them, and that's how they learn. And auditory learners, a child who learns best by listening. So how to figure out your child's learning style is to watch how they express themselves. For instance, auditory learners will express themselves best through words, while kinesthetic learners will use a lot of body language and won't be able to keep their hands to themselves. And then pay attention to their interests. Visual learners often like reading and watching TV. Kinesthetic learners usually like physical activity like playing outside or painting a picture. And then see how your child solves problems. Kinesthetic learners may count with their fingers when trying to solve math, or they love building Legos. And then have your child take a learning quiz. A Google search can help you find quizzes for both you and your child to take if you want a more formalized approach. So what do you do once you figure out the learning styles? You can look for curriculum that specifically tailors to a different learning styles. For instance, Sunlight has read out loud books as part of the program, which would be great for auditory learners. You can also incorporate their learning style into any teaching that you do. For example, creating flashcards for visual learners, or let kinesthetic learners build Legos while you read aloud. And that is one of my children, my youngest son. If I'm reading out loud, it's a hard time just sitting there and paying attention. But if I let him build Legos or color or draw or do something, just the movement of his hand helps him learn better. Now, I will just add in here that it may be hard if you have some children that are one way and some children that are another. For example, I mentioned how I have a lot of auditory learners who love me reading out loud. And for the kinesthetic learners, I have them play and maybe even write down notes, do something with their hands. Visual learners, that's when I get my whiteboard out and I will write keywords as I'm reading so that they can pay attention and they can see the words. We'll also pause. And if I'm reading something they don't understand, like a knight's armor, I might just in the middle of the chapter pull up a video about armor so they can watch it. So even though I have a curriculum that's mainly focused for auditory learners because there's so much read out loud, I find other ways that I involve the other kids and pull them in. So invite your kids to join you in their educational journey. And this is so important. It's helping them to understand how they learn and help them help you by leading the way. So some things that kids will probably approve of is let them sleep in. And of course, kids do need some structure and discipline. and they'll need your guidance in that, but it can be counterproductive to make a grumpy teen get up too early just because that's how public school works. Let them sleep in and maybe do their schoolwork later in the day. And I'm talking about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock instead of, 3 or 4 o'clock. Unless that works for your family, I'll leave that up to you. But I have found that letting my kids sleep in, letting them get rest, starting about 9:30 is a really good system for our family. Everyone's rested, they're feeling better. We also, another thing is that we don't allow any electronics until after their schoolwork is done. And then we also have all electronics off for the teens by 9 p.m. So they do make sure and get to sleep in the evenings. But sleep is so important. And then adjust assignments based on what interests your kids. Not everything has to be written down. If your child is maybe struggling to write down answers to questions, let them verbally explain their answers to you. For a kinesthetic learner, maybe have them build a model for you to explain what they learned. And this ties into the learning styles well. Instead of saying, okay, fill out every answer in this worksheet, maybe say, why don't you put on a skit and tell me what you learned? And this is the fun part of homeschooling. This is the way to be flexible. And then study theme. Does your son love cars? You could study engines, design, the history of transportation. If your daughter loves to bake, read books about baking, teach measurements, and experiment with recipes. One option is I love unit studies, and there's a great website called unitstudy.com. And my friend Amanda Bennett has written wonderful unit studies. And I love this curriculum. It takes the child's interest and it gets their attention and helps them understand how all the pieces of the whole fit together. It's a great way to improve critical thinking skills and to help them make deep connections on how all the parts of something fits together. So for example, horses, you might learn about horsemanship, and you might learn about the Middle Ages and how horses were used in jousting. You might learn about different anatomy parts of a horse. All these things can be tied together with the unit study. Also, then let your kids choose how to spend their free time. And this is something that might surprise you because most of our homeschooling day is done in 3 hours and there's not homework in the afternoon. There's a lot of, not homework in the afternoon or evening. There's a lot of time that kids can do things. They can learn to play guitar. They can paint or write, play basketball outside. My kids will sometimes do a obstacle course in the backyard. We have rabbits, we have guinea pigs that they play in. They thrive with independence. And an important life skill is having them have healthy hobbies. In high school, one of my oldest son, actually taught himself how to play the guitar. My daughter, who is now a professor of English, would spend hours and hours reading very thick books in very short amounts of time. My son, who now develops computer games, would write stories, and that he has his novel published. He has his video games have a story arc to them. So all these things help them develop what they learn. Now, currently, my 15-year-old is into everything in the Asian culture. She watches TV shows that are in Japanese or in Korean. She's teaching herself these languages. She makes herself flashcards. She spends hours every day on these things because that's what she enjoys doing with her free time. So think about how you can encourage your kids to use their free time to explore hobbies that they maybe didn't have time to explore before. And I will tell you right from the beginning, it might be hard because they might be used to people directing every moment and what they're supposed to be doing. And you'll probably hear a lot of, I'm bored, I'm bored. But if you push them in the right direction and help them maybe get objects, art project materials, or like my daughter, flashcards for her Japanese, they will learn that they can use that time to explore their hobbies. And then Let them choose where to go on field trips. The planning isn't all up to us as the teachers. Let your kids help you dream and plan when it comes to educational trips. They'll love having a say, and they will also learn important life skills in the process. And we have our favorite places that we love to go to on field trips. And, usually at the beginning of the month, I'll say, here's some ideas. Where do you want to go? And I'm always surprised that the kids love exploring. We have some Toltec Native American mounds that we went to one year, and that was something that they remembered that was nearby and they wanted to go to. So let them choose where they want to go on field trips. Now, activities. So there is a worksheet coming up in your guide. And so write down the names of your kids and write down everything that you think they might be interested in. If they love a certain type of animal, if they love outer space, if they love music, write down the specific interests. And these are also great lists that you can take when you go to the library and help them learn how to look at books on a certain subject, how to find them, teach them the Dewey Decimal System, and you will be amazed how much fun. And then also pray and think about how to use their interests to lead you in your teaching. All right, so there's the worksheets that I include in the workbook. There's worksheets on student interest sheets. So for each child, you can write down different things and ask them what things they would love to learn. Now, kids need less than we think, and they can do more than we think too. I learned this actually when I went to Kenya. I went with the Awana International, which is a great program that teaches kids about the Bible, and there's a lot of scripture memory. Well, Awana is actually larger internationally than they even are in the United States. And I knew it would break my heart going to Kenya, and especially going into some of the slums and seeing the Bible clubs there. But I never thought I would see so much and learn so much about homeschooling. These children were living in poverty, and yet they were so smart. They were working so hard with what little they had. So these are the things that I learned. Children can achieve more than we think they can. The school children there in Kenya quoted long passages of scripture from memory, all because their teachers worked with them over and over again. As a teacher, I sometimes give up far too easily. We'll start memory verse cards and then I'll forget about them. And then a month later, I'll pull them out again and realize we need to start completely all over. But I found that when I encourage hard work, my children rise to the occasion. And then developing children's natural talents is more important than getting books done. In one of the schools that we went to in one of the slums, the teacher had taught jewelry making, dance, and aerobatics. It was amazing to see these kids dancing and flipping all over the place. The teacher knew that jobs are scarce in their country, and those that can work out of their natural inclinations have a better chance of finding a job and succeeding in life. So she was teaching them a lot of life skills. And I have friends that take their kids on construction sites and teach them different life skills so they can learn and they can have wonderful skills that they can use for their future. Also, the point I want to focus on for a minute is how passionate teachers are more valuable than curricula. And the joy and enthusiasm are the best teachers. I saw that so much in these teachers when I was in Kenya. Your task then is to determine what your gifts are and get excited about them. When I'm excited about watercolor painting or a novel I'm writing, I'll talk about the elements of fiction. Some of my kids are more interested in others, but when they see my passion, they see that I am following my dreams, and they learn to do that themselves. So excitement is the best teacher. The absolutely best thing you can do is to save your sanity while homeschooling is to use your gifts and talents and strengths when it comes to teaching. Now, personally, I love everything literature-based, which you probably got the idea of by now. And the curricula that has been most successful throughout the years for my family is based on a lot of reading and writing. I enjoy teaching it, and so it makes it enjoyable to my kids. So think about what you enjoy and how you can use your own gifts and talents with your kids. On the other hand, my kids will tell you, especially my adult kids, I'm the worst math and science teacher on the planet. My kids aren't math wizards, and so I actually hired a tutor to help my older kids in math, which I'm perfectly okay with. All right, so teaching with your strengths, again, let your natural bent guide you. And when you find a topic that you struggle to teach, lean on others to help you. My friend Christine has a family who actually called an engineer friend to help them when they got stuck on math problems. I have a friend, Lauren, who comes over and teaches art to my kids. I've had another friend who was an English teacher who helped my daughter prepare for the ACT. And, if you can't afford to pay someone, trade and see what you can do in exchange for their help. So to sum it up, use curricula you enjoy, hire tutors for subjects you aren't fluent in, or trade with another parent. Don't be afraid to ask or reach out for help, and then enjoy the time together. Okay, here's the good news. My strengths have been my kids' strengths to the extreme. My daughter was called out by the dean for college for her writing skills. And my son wrote and published a novel by the time he was 22. So all those strengths, I've seen it multiply in my kids. If you have fears as a homeschooling parent about your weakest subject, join the club. No child's education will ever be perfect, but hopefully with the right curriculum and the right help, you can even help them in your weak areas. If you have fears as a homeschooling mom about your weakest subject, join the club. It's all of us. But somehow my kids are succeeding and they have found ways to learn despite my weakness. Okay, so consider assessing your strengths. Write down your strengths and weaknesses when it comes to academics. Think about what you excel in, what you don't, and why. How can you use your strengths to help your kids? How can you fill in the gaps when you fall short? And we actually have a worksheet. The teacher evaluation worksheet is in your packet. Finally, surround yourself with a positive, supporting team. Yes, they are out there. It's easy and normal to feel alone and isolated when you start homeschooling, especially when you don't know anyone else who homeschools. Although now I think it is becoming so much more common that you probably have friends that are also homeschooling. But finding community support is very important. So, how to find a community? Tell others about your choice. My friend Christy says once they went public with their decision to homeschool, other homeschooling families seemed to come out of the woodwork. And I found that true too in my own life. People that I didn't know homeschool, all of a sudden you see them around town and they're with their kids and you realize, oh, they're homeschooling too. Just talking about your decision will prompt your friends and families to connect you with people that they know who homeschool. Also, Google homeschool groups. Just a quick online search will help you find some groups in your area. You can also find a lot of online support through blogs, Facebook groups, Pinterest boards, and just seeing all the resources will help you feel alone. And I remember when I first just even moved in to my area, I put homeschool group and I put the name of our county, and I was amazed that there were 2 different types of groups locally, and I got involved in one. And it's amazing to see that there was this huge network that I didn't even know about when we first moved in to our town. And then keep an eye out for other homeschooling parents. And you often might meet other homeschool moms at the park when you're there with your kids or when you're going to different events, the museum, the zoo. You might see other parents, you start talking, and you can find them and encourage them just as they can encourage you. And then attend a homeschooling convention. This is a great place to get inspired, learn new things, find some fresh ideas, and meet with other homeschooling parents. And I love speaking at the Teach Them Diligently homeschool conferences. I know now many conferences are going online for a season, but it is so fun to connect with other people at homeschool conferences. Now, you will most likely get this questions from skeptical friends or family members, but know that this is normal. Some days, especially at the beginning, you may get a lot of critical comments from people around you. First off, make sure you and your spouse are on the same page about homeschooling. You shouldn't homeschool, of course, unless you are both on board. But often people's family members are leery, and sometimes it might even be your spouse who is leery until he or she really sees it in actions. But even personally, I had friends and family members who thought I was crazy for wanting to homeschool. So, tips to handle criticism: pray. A little prayer goes a long way. When you face criticism, pray for other people's hearts and pray for wisdom to know how to express yourself as you discuss homeschooling. Know that you might not get everyone to agree with you, but just know that you can come alongside people and explain it the best that you can. Also, get educated so you can educate. The more you know about homeschooling, the more you'll be able to explain to others. Read books, listen to podcasts, seek advice from homeschooling veterans. The more comfortable you'll be explaining it to others, the more they'll understand and get excited with you. And then get excited. Excitement is contagious. It's really as simple as that sometimes. I've heard stories of people who won over to homeschooling simply because of another parent's enthusiasm. Also, when all else fails, try this quote: I'm giving my child a private Christian education at a fraction of the cost, which is true. Okay, activity. If you don't already have a homeschool group, do a Google search in your area. Ask people you know if they know anyone who homeschools, and then find homeschool pages on Facebook and Instagram and follow them. And there's actually a worksheet for homeschool support in your packet. Okay, now we're going to talk about making learning a lifestyle. First of all, involve your kids in everyday life, which you hear me say over and over again. So bring your kids along to the grocery store, as you vote, as you get the dog groomed. All those are very valuable education opportunities. Go on field trips, take nature walks, go to museums, visit national parks, and keep your schedule simple. Don't try to stick to a strict school schedule. Leave room to explore rabbit trails and other opportunities that might come up. Also, develop daily routines. If you're struggling with feeling like your life is really chaotic, a routine can transform the craziness into a much more calm existence. Best of all, not only will your home and life be more orderly, but you can also likely get more done. Also, if you're going to be a successful stay-at-home homeschooling mom, you've got to be disciplined. No, you don't need to run such a tight ship that every 15 minutes you have scheduled, but you do need to set up and follow a routine, which we'll be talking about in the later module. And then again, look for teaching moments. And then one important thing: volunteer in your community together. Distinguished homeschool leaders Raymond and Dorothy Moore recommend an hour a day to serve in your home or community. Can you imagine how much your family can impact the community by volunteering an hour a day or even an hour a week? So here are some tips if you want to volunteer with your family. First of all, fit the activity to a child. Expose your kids to various volunteering opportunities, then ask them, what would you like to do? If your son loves cooking, maybe suggest making cookies for the family next door. Work as a team. The manager of the Family Service Program says that volunteering as a family can develop self-esteem, reinforce family values, and help kids to develop new skills. Also, be prepared. Help children approach volunteering with confidence by being prepared. If necessary, get in touch with a volunteer coordinator and make sure you know the answers to the questions like, where do we need to go? When do we need to be there? I could add in, do we need to wear a mask? Who will we be reporting to? What are we expected to bring? And why is our role important? And then give feedback. After you volunteer, talk to your kids about the experience. Point out any positive behaviors you saw in them. Like, I saw how kind you were when you served that meal, or I saw how helpful you were when you helped that young mom get those diapers. It will be just the thing that will make your child want to do it again. And then value the lesson learned. With my kids, I realized that volunteering helped them establish their identity. When my daughter, Leslie, was about 10 years old, she used to babysit our local crisis pregnancy center. In return, she discovered that her caring attitude and helping heart was valuable to many young moms in need. And it was this discovery that has impacted her as she's grown to a young adult. She's always reaching out and serving, and she loves connecting with new people. So, in your worksheet packet, there's a volunteer information sheet. So spend some time praying about ways that you can volunteer in everyday life. Look for areas to volunteer, find ways your whole family can participate, and talk to a volunteer coordinator and ask all those questions about where you need to go and when you need to be there. And then next module is module 6, designing systems and schedules that work with your family. Hint, there is a balance between being scheduled and being flexible.